Associate editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire, TalkTV contributor Esther Kraku, and Grace Blakely, the socialist commentator and author. Thanks, the three of you, for joining us. What did you make of that, Kevin?
Well, I watched the game for a start. I really enjoyed it. England were outclassed, outplayed. We got through on the skin of their teeth. And Lauren James just getting sent off, and deservedly so, just shows how competitive it is. But look, you can't take politics and policies out of sport. They've always mixed. I mean, it's always been the case. I remember I'm old enough, the opposition to the white supremacist tours from South Africa, rugby and cricket, 1969 and 70, very successful campaigns against them. Olympic boycotts, all you go. And women are going to speak up. Of course, I don't want to be another one of those men shouting here, but women are going to speak up for trans women in sport or against them around that issue of biological sex. It's going to divide women. It's going to divide players. But I don't see what the point of having a go at them is.
Politics has always been in sport, as Kevin says. Does it distract players unnecessarily?
Well, yes, especially when you lose, because then people are going to say if you focus on playing the game instead of your activism, you may have won. And I think Megan Rapinoe has made a reputation for herself, just ruffling feathers in that way. I would say I didn't watch the game. I actually don't watch women's football.
Do you watch men's football?
Yes, I do. I watch women's sports. I watch mainly athletics and gymnastics. So I do support women's sports. I just don't like watching women's football because I'm used to watching men's football. I think the pitches are too big for the women. I think seriously, no, seriously, like when I see them on the pitch, they look like children to me. I'm like, you need to shrink
that much smaller than them.
But the thing is,
there was a debate. There was a debate about reducing the goals.
Hold on, let me finish. When you look at the female goalkeepers in the net, they look like children because they're they are just not as large. So I think you need to shrink down the pitches.
Is it not then more challenging and more skillful? I think we're missing the point here massively, which is that, okay, so my niece is currently working as a coach. She coaches a young men's football team near where we live. And she was telling me about all of the massive barriers she faced to getting into her career where she is now and how difficult it's been. She played football for a while and then got herself into this position. And she said watching the women at the Euros, watching the Lionesses, seeing this huge support that the country had for that team was really transformational for her. Not just in thinking, oh, maybe I can do this, but actually in the way that she was treated by her peers. So I think we really have to think about not just, who's watching the people at the top. We also think about how this is trickling down to the rest of the sport.
But hold on.
This happened after the Euros. Girls play football in school now. There used to be boys' sports and girls' sports.
I don't understand
the
sort of comparison that's being drawn here. Do you know how difficult it is to become a successful men's football player? I mean, your odds of even getting on a team, how many players on the Premier League?
But I don't think that's the point because, there is obviously there's a difference between there being a difficulty resulting from the competitiveness of the sport and there being a difficulty resulting from people placing barriers to your progression as a person in sport.
No, but that doesn't make sense because the whole point of the point of football is based on skill. The only discrimination you're going to get is if you're not good enough.
But I was just literally saying that, like, my cousin who works in this area has had difficulties because there have been people who say you shouldn't be doing this because you're a woman.
No, maybe
which is very different to saying
they are female football players. Hold on,
she's very good.
Apparently not good enough to make a national team.
A final point from each of you, and then we'll move on. Do you feel you've resolved? I mean,
the thing is, listen, I'm happy that women's football is getting the attention that it deserves and the funding, and more and more people are interested in watching it. I don't think that drawing a binary between saying that actually women's football should be for biological women is the same as, trying to exclude people. I mean, that's literally what it's called, women's football. I think on the point that someone like Megan Rapinoe is getting a lot of, hatred because of her activism, well, yes, and especially because she lost. Because if you're going to be an activist and you lose, well, that's a double whammy.
I think that we've always had this argument that anyone who engages in what we call politics, i.e. sticking up for people who are like them in their sport, gets in the way of the sport, and that actually they're only doing this because they're not very good. It's just a way of basically protecting the status quo. It's a way of saying, especially at the lower rungs of the sport, which are perhaps less visible in the public, where you're going to get more kind of a laddie culture and people being excluded. It's a way of saying to people, this is not for people like you.